Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our panel, Bridging Gender Gaps for Women and Girls, Beijing and Beyond. As we all may know, it's 30 years since Beijing, the World Women's Conference in Beijing, held in 1995. And this panel will be reviewing what progress has been made in terms of gender equality, what more we need to do, how far we need to go to further close the gender gaps. My name is Bisi Adebayo, and I'll be moderating this panel with my dear friend and co-host, Lois Herman. Lois is physically in New York. And then
At
there's also
CSW.
Noya will be moderating the chat room. Let me quickly introduce Bridging Development Gaps to you. Bridging Development Gap is a non-profit international grassroots organization founded in Geneva in 2019, and it was created to challenge the inequalities and vulnerabilities of women, youth, and children that prevent them from the full realization of their fundamental human rights, as well as their equal participation in the society. We work towards the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and also Agenda 2063 of the African Union. Our efforts are dedicated at stimulating responsible action in order to foster equity amongst men and women. We envision a world free from any form of discriminations, and we are determined to continue closing that gap. Before I go into what gender equality is all about, I would like to bring on board Lois, who is going to talk a little bit about Beijing and what, if I've missed out anything in my introduction of the panel. Welcome.
Well, I'm really pleased. Women's UN Report Network is proud to be a sponsor with BDG. I serve on BC's board, but I have never, in any of my years at the UN in New York, seen so much discrimination. And much of that is related to the US administration. And I will be interested in hearing whether you all have seen cuts in your aid, but that really affected some of the women who wanted to come here, the ones who needed to come here. And not only that, but we're getting lashbacks on almost all the pivotal issues of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I will listen carefully to what each of you say because we address high level to grassroots. And what we need so much are action plans that can be reinforced. Paper declarations, responses are good, but they have to be followed up. And that is one of the big gaps. Thank you, BC.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Gender inequality is a social process by which men and women are not treated equally. And this treatment arises for a number of reasons. Patriarchy mainly, and it's also because of the way our societies have been constructed. So there's uneven access to education, there's difficulty in accessing labor market, there's a lack of employment equality, job segregation as well, lack of legal protection, poor medical care, lack of political representation, violations in inheritance rights, unpaid care work for women, participation in the informal sector, poor technological capacity as well as violence against women. Even though a lot of progress have been made, we have these factors that continue to pull women down. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box. The box is being monitored, and you can be called upon if you need to make any comments. We have about 90 minutes for the entire panel. Each of our speakers will have about 10 minutes, and then so that we have enough time for question and answers. Let me go in now to call upon our expert panelists. We have Gina. Gina is speaking all the way from New York. She's a public policy and administration professional. I will let her introduce herself further on when we call upon her. She's also the founder and project director for ALMA Africa. We also have Dr. Fulata Moyo. She's a feminist, atheist of Ubuntu. I will not go into much of her story because she has a very interesting story. I will also let her introduce herself later on. We have Tinuade. Is Tinuade here? I think that's the second person that we are missing. Tinuade is our tech person. She's going to be taking us into the digital transformation world and how we can use that to further close the gender gaps. Rayla is also missing, I think. This could be.
I'm here, doctor.
Oh, you are here. Okay.
Sorry, because of that timing, I had
Yes,
6:30.
timing.
Yes,
Yes.
and I gave a commitment to another meeting. So I just quickly told them I have to run. But
You are here with us now. Okay, good. So we have Rayla will be speaking all the way from Philippines, and I think that time difference may also be causing some problems. I'll try to reach her afterwards. She's the co-founder and president of I Am Sam Foundation. I Am Sam means we'll talk about that later. We also have Mrs. Ugo Nanchi, Executive Director of Daughters of Virtue and Empowerment Initiative. She's based in Nigeria. So let's have some key facts to set the tone of our discussion this evening. A lot of progress have been made, I told you. But according to UN Women, gender equality is a major cause and effect of hunger and poverty. It is estimated that 60% of chronological hungry people are women and girls. Women are disproportionately affected by poverty. 70% of the world's poor are women. Women also represent fewer than 5% of all agric land owners in North Africa, West Asia, and in Sub-Saharan Africa. They make up an average of about 15%. Collectively, women in Sub-Saharan Africa spend about 40 billion hours a year collecting water per week. Research indicates that when more income is put in the hands of women, child nutrition, health, and education improves. Men's average wages are higher than women's in both rural and urban areas. Women work 17.4 hours compared to 14 hours more than men in places like Benin and Tanzania. Educated women are more likely to have greater decision-making power within their households. In terms of political representation, there are fewer women. As a matter of fact, national parliamentarians worldwide are only about 25%. Around 130 million girls worldwide are out of school, according to UNESCO. So 2/3 of the world's 996 million illiterates are women. And according to global statistics, just 39% of rural girls attend school. Burden of care is majorly carried by women. An estimation of 1.6 million women experience domestic abuse every year in places like UK. 43% of young women in London have experienced harassment on the streets. Over 200 million girls are forced into marriages around the world before the age of 15. 70% of casualties in Israel and around Gaza are women. Women continue to experience all sorts of violence. They are weapons of war. They are violated, raped, and killed. Now the girls are turned into brides even before their puberty. So the gender disparity, which is further, compounded by discriminating societal values and norms, further make girls and women more vulnerable. So you see, we have a lot of work. I don't even want to go into, the other statistics, but we have enough to set the tone for our discussion this evening. So I would like to call on our first speaker now. I've given the modalities of how the panel is going to run. We'll have about 3-4 questions going round. So the first question to all the panelists, you all have a topic that you are talking about from your contest. You have some minutes to present that. Then we'll come back to you with another round of questions. So I will start with, Lois, do you have any more thing you want to say? We can't hear you. You're muted.
There we go. We had a panel this week on policing and women, and we had actual experienced police academics. We had people from like the police forces of major cities in the US. And what we realize is that so many things affecting women affect the interaction between the police, and that there's a lot that needs to be done. But the vulnerability of women is magnified when they are homeless. And I know there's a lot of homeless in UK and absolutely in the US. And I see it here on the street, people sitting in doorways. So homelessness and basic food and health needs are absolutely pivotal if we are to achieve gender equality. Thank you.
Please, you are muted.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Fulata. You can open the floor. So please.
Okay. So I'm Fulata Moyo, and I'm the founder of Team Reda Stream, a Malawi registered charity that responds to human trafficking in northern Malawi. And so I'm bringing the gaps when it comes to responding to human trafficking. And I hope that I know that within the 10 minutes, I'll be able to talk about, just to give you a snippet of the realities of the communities we are working in, and then to also give you one diagnosis of what is the problem. And with that diagnosis, I also want to look at what are the remedies and then make recommendations. Thank you. So I will be focusing on human trafficking. Should I continue, or that's enough for now, and then I come back with the whole realm?
Please continue.
Okay. So, so as I said, the reality on the ground, we are working in northern Malawi, and I want to give an example of one community as a case study, so that when I'm giving even the diagnosis and the responses needed, then we understand that we are really contextualizing. We are not just generalizing. So Chintindindi is a small, it's not small community, it's a community of about, it's a rural community of over about 17,000 people. And so it's most of the desperation that is enabling human trafficking in Chintindindi is the poverty, the desperation caused by poverty. So and poverty in Chintindindi is not just a lack of money. It is about lack of choices that fuel what they call Johannesburg syndrome, that sees men deserting their families to look for non-existing jobs in Johannesburg, South Africa. And so the female-headed households in Chintindindi have no sources of income outside of the small-scale farming, which largely depends on unpredictable rains. And girls dropping out of school is very high because the school has no necessary resources to provide quality education. And most of the parents, mainly these mothers, can't afford what going to school for their children, especially girls, entails. So this often leads to work around kind of solutions which involve child marriage and trafficking. And therefore, traffickers, they take advantage of the desperation. They lure young people with fake promises of jobs in cities or across borders, especially through South Africa. And therefore, survivors of trafficking, when they are rescued, they are most of the time stranded where they were trafficked. And when they return home, those who manage, they are faced with mental health challenges, no support, and they are left to face stigma, as well as the same poverty that made them vulnerable in the first place. The challenge that we have also diagnosed, which we have found, has to do with some of the donor agencies that provide responses. So they often bring prepackaged solutions that do not reflect on the real needs of the communities, especially when communities like Chintindindi, they are bound to what we call Ubuntu ethos, that of being collective and communitarian. And so most of the times, the biggest problems that we find include the donor arrogance. Many donors believe they know what is best for African communities without listening to the people themselves. They push for expensive reports, endless meetings, and pilot projects that never scale because they sound very great in theory, but they are very impractical. And then there is also a bias against African poverty. Instead of tackling root causes, good feminized quality education, land ownership, fair wages, dignified work conditions, and real economic opportunities, these donors most of the times focus on short-term that does not change the systems. And there is also so much ignoring of survivors' voices. Because the real experts in human trafficking, if we focus on that, are the women and the children who have lived it. But they are rarely consulted in designing interventions. So this is one of the main problems that we have found. So, and I have 4 points about what needs to change. Should I go ahead?
Please go ahead.
Okay. So if we are serious about fighting human trafficking, like in communities like Chintindindi, we need solutions that work for the people, not just the donor reports. So this means that one, we need real economic opportunities. So training survivors and at-risk youth, especially girls, in practical skills like agri-business, tailoring, carpentry, baking for business, and things like that, things they can use to make a living. I also recommend, like you see that I said feminized quality education that does not stop at primary school. Many programs stop at basic education, but girls need scholarships and vocational training to break the cycle of poverty. They also need educational premises and services that enhance their femininity, including menstrual dignified care. There is also need for funding that goes direct to the communities. Too much money stays in the hands of NGOs and consultants instead of reaching the actual people in need. We need direct funding for grassroots women organizations and groups and survivor-led initiatives. Most of the women and survivor-led initiatives, as we heard even from BC, they are rooted in women's passion to see change, and therefore are the most trustworthy when it comes to use of resources. We need to hold businesses accountable. Many trafficked girls end up in exploitative jobs in farms, mines, households, and companies and households must be forced to pay fair wages, provide humane working conditions, and stop abusing trafficked labor and servitude. We need to listen to survivors. Survivors have a voice, and often they know what they need. They need more than just rescue. They need land, they need business capital, they need security, they need legal care, they need justice against their traffickers, as well as health care, things that give them real power over their own lives. So my call, I want to finish by giving a 4-point call to action. The fight against human trafficking cannot be won through meetings and it has to go beyond the meetings. Here in the meetings, we gather knowledge, but let's really start investing into lives of the people in the community, as we heard from even the summary. So one, donors must shift from charity to justice, supporting economic independence instead of
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
We might be having a bandwidth issue. We'll see if
We
she
can
comes
hear
back.
you. I think she's the one.
Yes, I was disconnected.
All right. I think it might be just a moment until she signs back on. So if we want to, I'll see when she comes back on. If we want to continue, it looks like Lois might have a question.
Yeah, Vlad, I hope you will send me your presentation today, because it is really accurate. And I'm reflecting on a conference once in Bangkok on AIDS. And a person in the audience with all the important people up on the stage said, "Do you realize how hard we work for you to come and see us in order to make it possible for you to give us some support? We worked for days to welcome you and give you the perspective, but you come in an air-conditioned car, you stay in a fancy hotel, you spend a few hours with us, and then you're gone. You don't experience the realities of our situation, and that is a huge gap. Many of the donors are in the global north and west, and they don't have a feel for what you've been talking about. Plus, the three largest commodities of illegal action in this world. The first is arms. And I just received an email today that Sudan is on the bridge of another major conflict. Okay, they go the arms and drugs and women. Now, that's a sad statistic.
Thank you, Lois. I think Folata is yet to rejoin. Okay, so we can now move on to Gina. I think to save time, all the three questions we can take at the same time. So you are going to be speaking about gender equality from your perspective, from your context, and then also tell us what the challenges are and how you are working to overcome that.
All right.
Gina, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes,
Right.
we can hear you.
Right. Thank you so much. Dr. BC and Lois, thank you so much to be here, and everyone who's joined us. Welcome. My name is Gina Abena-Medeka, as mentioned earlier. I'm currently pursuing a PhD in public policy at the Virginia Commonwealth University. I'm also the founder of Alma Africa. We advocate against gender-based violence across Africa. It's been this theme, when Dr. BC reached out to me, I thought it was extremely interesting. CSW couldn't have narrowed down on a more important subject matter at this time. 3 decades ago, the world made a promise to women and girls in general for their rights, that their rights will no longer be peripheral, but central to all human progress. But today we find ourselves asking a crucial question: how do we transform these promises into tangible realities? Even though some progress has been made, how do we further these progresses? Within our Ghanaian context, I think there's always this uncomfortable truth cuts across almost all contexts, where the gap between policy commitments and practical implementation remains one of our biggest challenges. And the Beijing Platform for Action provided us with a very comprehensive blueprint. Yet our global report card shows uneven progress, even within respective domestic context, within a Ghanaian context. The urban-rural implementations or the progress made within the rural and urban cities still have disparities within, those contexts, regardless of being the same country. These statistics may not necessarily merely reflect numbers, but they represent the lived experiences of women across, the world, and women in Ghana especially, whose realities have not matched the rhetoric of some of these regional or international policies. I'd like to touch on some successful implementation strategies that have been implemented in Ghana. Of course, a lot more can be done, but it's important to see where progress has been done so we acknowledge how we can build upon those to enhance sustainability. The question is not about how we have to, enact more policies, but how do we best commit to the existing ones that we have? And in Ghana, one of the key strides made has to do with the gender responsive budgeting. Consistently across various governments, we see the effort to include or be more deliberate in including gender responsive funding in our budgeting processes. In Africa, we know Rwanda leads in this regard, not just in Africa, but the whole world, with its commitment to financial allocations, and which of course has translated into 61% female representation in parliament, the highest in the world. And so Rwanda is always the benchmark for, not all in this regard, Rwanda is a benchmark for all of us. But I see Ghana as well, and I think last week we read a 2025 budget, where the government is committing about 5 points. Let me pull up the actual figure. Yeah, it's about $51.3 million in establishing a women's development bank for the country. And this is building upon deliberate efforts made in the past to establish gender specific courts for gender-based violence, also allocating resources for advocacy projects across the country. And I think that this very deliberate efforts in allocating, funds in responding to some of these issues in relation to gender-based violence, which is a key focus subject matter for me, it's laudable, and we can only encourage other African countries to emulate or to build upon these systems. The second mechanism would be the accountability mechanisms established. Ghana, after enacting the Domestic Violence Act in 2025, went ahead to establish the Domestic Violence Victim Support Unit under the Ghana Police Service. And it's popularly known as DOVSU. DOVSU only focuses on issues of gender-based violence. So if you report any form of violence to the police, you are directed to the DOVSU office, and every police office or majority of police stations across the country in all regions, in all districts, have an office, a dedicated DOVSU office. And with this initiative has seen an increase in reports of gender-based violence. And the argument is always whether the increase in reports is actually an increase in violence cases. Other schools of thought argue that the increase may be perhaps the availability of reporting mechanisms where people can now boldly, they know there's an institution that caters for their need and can boldly report such cases. Either ways, it's a win to have these reporting and accountability mechanisms. I think 2 years ago, the judicial system also established a dedicated court to adjudicate cases of gender-based violence because of the calls for how the backlog, usually the cases of gender-based violence face within the court systems, they're not usually seen as very serious. They would rather attend to other cases, criminal cases, ahead of issues related to gender-based violence. So that was a huge accomplishment as well, to see that these cases are speedily dealt with. Another key strategy that has been effective has been the multi-sectorial approaches in Ghana. So even though the Ministry of Gender is the key ministry of focus when it comes to implementing anything related to gender-based violence, it has a strong collaborative mechanism with the Ghana Police Service, the Judicial Service, the Attorney General's Office, and other institutions, relevant institutions around. And it's been I always say when we talk about a framework in targeting gender-based violence, Ghana is just at the verge of it. We're not absolutely there, but we have a very strong framework if built upon sustainably and even implemented as written on paper. We will have a very strong framework that the world could learn from. But I have seen how personally in our advocacy projects on the ground, the collaborative effort has been extremely wonderful. Having the judiciary respond so swiftly with the dedicated courts for gender-based violence, the police service having the DOVSU under its arm, the Attorney General making sure that legal frameworks are accounted for. And this should be the focus, and this should be the way forward if we're looking for sustainability in protecting the rights of women across the world. Then the fourth will be the localization of global frameworks. I think the first speaker and also Lois touched upon it briefly about how global frameworks or international treaties tend to hang within a country level or even within the urban areas without permeating into grassroots or communities where the actual outcomes need to be felt. And that usually affects implementation, because to effectively realize the outcome of policies, they have to be reflective at community level. They have to be relatable to individuals for whom these policies were made or enacted. And one of the strategies the ministry uses is relies a lot more on the civil civic society. Now, it has its downsides because over-reliance on the private sector to implement some of these projects may not necessarily have the sustainable oversight, or you may not necessarily have control over information or have control over implementation as such, but it's still a very effective strategy in broadening your scope into areas where the ministry may not necessarily or readily have available resources for. So these are the 4 key areas or 4 key effective implementation strategies from the Ghanaian context that I think are worth highlighting. However, as I mentioned, there's still a long way to go. And what would be the way forward? I think we should desist from looking at issues of gender-based violence from an isolated perspective. We have started a very strong framework in building collaborations or having a multi-sectorial approach to effectively eradicating gender-based violence, and this should continue and even be institutionalized. We should also strengthen our top-down collaborative approaches. I touched on the fact that the policies are made for members of our community. And if it's not relatable, or if they don't feel the impact of these policies, then the policy has not effectively met its use. And so there should be a lot more top-down approaches. Nobody can effectively tell you what they want or how they feel better than the beneficiaries or the supposed beneficiaries of these policies. So we should hear from community members and make sure that their needs meet the international policies that are being implemented, and how do we coin or how do we adopt these policies in a way that actually answers the questions within our context. As Fulata mentioned in her presentation, I thought I was just nodding, most of these international expectations are out of context. So how do we contextualize them to make sure that we meet the actual needs of our communities? And the last suggestion I will make would be to remove political convenience or the over-politicization of issues related to women. Each political party wants to be seen as the more gender responsive. I think that these sensitive cases should be depoliticized and addressed as a human rights issue. That way, it allows us to build upon systems. It allows us to build upon frameworks rather than trying to tuke them or trying to adopt systems based on our political standing. Lois effectively touched on what's going on in the US now. We may have long arguments depending on where you stand or what your belief is, but once we politicize issues regarding women's rights, we will be sitting here in the next 100 years discussing, again, effective frameworks on how to bridge the gap between, how to build a gender inequality gap. The answer is to focus on it as a human rights issue and to depoliticize it. Within our context is the big problem where each party wants to show that we have what it takes or we have a different approach. Let's just depoliticize and move forward and look at it as a human rights issue. I think that will bring a more sustainable lens, and that would bring a more equal lever to dealing with the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gina. You've actually covered a lot. And I love the fact, that you said that gender issues, women's rights issues should not be addressed in silos. And I would, I quite appreciate that, because there's a lot of interconnectivity among all these issues, even amongst the the Sustainable Development Goals. So if we take each of them as a standalone, we have a long way to go. Before I let you go, I just want you to expatiate more on the international expectations being out of context with local reality. What do you mean by that? You are muted.
Thank you, Dr. BC. I think that usually when international treaties are enacted, and I stand corrected, developed countries are always used as a benchmark or or as the lever to which some of these policies are, even though we may adopt them in our context. Fulata rightfully talked about how international donors think they know how to influence issues into our context better than us. Let me use a typical example, and I know this will be very controversial. And I said this it was a debate in my doctoral class. I said, when we talk about women empowerment, the word may be the same within the African context and the US, but different meanings. In Africa, the primary issue may be educating women, fighting against traditional harmful practices, pushing against patriarchal boundaries that are ingrained in our traditional beliefs. Whereas when you look at it in the American context, even though you may have similarities, the degrees to some of the challenges we face may vary. The focus here may even be on perhaps sexual orientation, far more than it will be on traditional harmful practices. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily different, but the context varies and the degrees vary. And it's very important to take note of it. And when we assume that the word should be used in a blanket manner, we may be missing out on the actual need of the communities within the global south, within the African continent. That's what I mean by international policies, perhaps sometimes may be out of context. And this is where conversations or bringing experts also from our context to the table when some of these decisions are being made is key. And how dialogue from a down to top approach is essential. So we may have a broad targeted framework, but how does this impact or actually influence your community? How does this terminology, what is this defined when we say women empowerment? I asked my lecturer straightforward, I said, I wish you had asked one question. What does women empowerment mean in Africa? I wish that would have been your question. You assumed it meant the same thing everywhere. It may be, but the context varies. And you should have allowed me to explain what our context is. And this is what I'm saying. This is what I mean by that. It may not be different, but there may be variations in how we, or what is essential or what is needed. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you answered the question. I'll come back to you, but think more about the difference, what gender empowerment means in different localities and contexts. I'll come back to you. But to save time, let's go back to, thank you so much, Gina, for, that bringing the Ghanaian situation on board for us. Let's go back to Malawi now. Fulata, are you back on? So let's, so that you can finish off your presentation.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. I feel like my computer was so tired of hearing my monotonous voice, and it reacted. So now I'm talking to it nicely. Anyway, I was at the point where I was talking about the 4 actions, call to actions that we can think about, and especially because when we are thinking of starting with the real investment into real lives of the community people, as Gina has talked to it, you BC in your remarks, you talked to it, and Lois as well. So I 4 things that I think are important from my analysis is that donor must shift from charity to justice. So investing more in supporting economic independence and the enhancement of the dignity of the people that they are dealing with. And that government must invest in local economies so that families are not forced to send their girls away for survival. And that communities must lead the solutions, because the people living the problem are the ones who understand it best. And and then the last point that I wanted to say was that there is need for comprehensive research initiatives. This is important because to provide gender segregated data for evidence-based gender sensitive responses in human trafficking, there is need for research, because at least when we are talking about Malawi, so far there is no real statistical evidence regarding the numbers, the types of human trafficking that happens, origins and destinations of the trafficked. Up to now, we are doing mainly guesswork. So we really need to invest in research that will give us real concrete evidence. And for now, I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Philata. Human trafficking is a huge problem. And for as long as we have that, we can't be talking about gender equality if our girls are being subjected to all sorts. Lois, I think you remember one of the panels we had, and you muted yourself, Lois. One of the panels we had, and the lady was talking about human trafficking from Nigeria. Do you remember that, and how those girls were handled on the plane? So we can't be talking about gender equality if human trafficking is not addressed. So it's true, we really need data, comprehensive data. But then we are speaking to our governments. I don't think we are speaking to the international community, because the way this is coming out is like we are blaming other people for problems that we should be solving locally, flatter,
Yeah.
isn't it? So it's our government that we need to be talking to. Unfortunately, this time around, we didn't bring in any government representative. That was an oversight on my side. Somehow I felt maybe we need to discuss the issues before we bring them in, for them to respond and tell us, because they would have been, it would have been nice to have them present on this panel. But thank you so much, Fulata. Now we'll go to Nigeria. Let's go and get the context from Nigeria. Mrs. Ugo Nachi is the Executive Director of Daughters of Virtue, an empowerment initiative. She's based in Nigeria, and she'll be talking to us. She will introduce herself, and then she will tell us the situation from the Nigerian context, what the solutions are, and then how they can be scaled up later on. Ugo, over to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Ugo, are you here?
Thank you, Bisi, and to all the other panelists and all the participants on this call. I wish each and every one of us a happy International Women's Day. This is our month, so it's a great thing that it's a Women's Month. Thank you very much. So I'm the Executive Director of DoveNet. DoveNet is Daughters of Virtue and Empowerment Initiative. And our focus is primarily on strengthening and empowering women and girls, building their confidence and transforming them into valuable people that can contributors to the overall development of the community. So we want to raise women that will be able to make impacts in their community. And DoveNet also has a consultative status with UN ECOSOC. Having said that, I will be speaking on bridging gender gaps for development of women and girls, Beijing and beyond. We'll be talking about the Nigeria context. And we'll just look at the current status of gender equality in Nigeria, challenges that persist, progress made since Beijing Declaration, the root causes of the gender gaps, the position and roles of religion, education, economy, and then strategies that we're adopting to change that. Like we have all talked about the Beijing Declaration in 1995. Just today, I saw where Gertrude Mongella and a lot of others in New York were celebrating and recalling what happened in that conference in Beijing. This is 30 years And the essence of that declaration was to fight for gender equality globally. It was not just about Nigeria, it was a global call for a comprehensive agenda to advance women's rights and empowerment, emphasizing the need for collaborative approaches to tackle systemic barriers that were identified. For Nigeria, Nigeria has tried to establish a framework aimed at empowering the women and promoting their rights across all sectors. And it's a great thing that we are here to celebrate and commemorate the 30th anniversary of that declaration. So what's the current status of gender equality in Nigeria? The current status actually, for me, is a mixed bag. While some progress has been made, there is still a lot of work to be done. In Nigeria, progress has been made in women's rights with increased political participation and access to education. But I must add that I just said political participation because most times it's mostly as voters. However, significant challenges still exist. So Nigeria remains a highly patriarchal society where men dominate public and private spheres of life, including the lives of their women. Women are in subordinate positions. This plays out politically, socially, economically, psychologically, and otherwise. There is also low representation of women in parliament. And this, it says, about just 3.9%. In the Senate, there are only 4 women out of 109 men. Yeah. Women are underrepresented in leadership positions, and they experience discrimination and violence in various forms. There is also child marriage and high adolescent birth rates. We just had a program, an activity that was specifically targeted at first-time adolescent mothers, and you see a very young girls that got into relationships and got married. There's also prevalence of gender-based violence. There's also economic inequality. Women in Nigeria face significant economic inequalities. I know if BC talked about that at the time she was laying the foundation for this meeting. Most of the women are employed in the informal sector, which means that most of the things that they do will just be maybe street trading, small stuff. So, but the big activities, the big earnings and all that is by men. So that limits their access to social security benefits. There's also uneven access to quality healthcare and education, especially in the rural areas. Nigeria's rural and marginalized communities face significant disparities in accessing quality healthcare and education. I wouldn't want to go into details, but in 2020, only 45.6% of rural residents had access to improved healthcare. So that shows exactly the kind of situation that we find ourselves. On the current status of gender equality, we have the government has tried to make some progress. And some of this progress are in the area of legislative reforms aimed at protecting women's rights. We have what we call the VAP law, Violence Against Women, Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. And that has been helping to ensure that women's rights are protected. We also have the National Gender Policy. We have the National Gender Policy.
Check out 2:30.
Other legal frameworks that are helping to protect the rights of women. There's also improvement in girls' education through the universal basic education. I'm just trying to highlight some of these things to let us know that on the part of government, they are trying their best to ensure that the right policies are in place. But at the end, we'll find out whether they are able to sustain it. So Nigeria has seen notable increase in women participation in politics, with more women holding political positions in public office. But I must say that it is not, it's mostly in appointive positions. So when you come to the aspect of running for political office, it's still a long way to go for the women. So there's still a long way to go to achieve parity, where it's still a work in progress. Even the 35% affirmative action that were promised, that is also captured in the policies, is still a mirage. We have not seen so much about that. So there's growing awareness and advocacy against gender-based violence. It's an issue that really came to strong limelight during the COVID period. And then a lot of men are also being involved. They are engaged in ensuring that they create some form of awareness on the need to bring in gender equality, and the need to promote it. So prominent men in Nigeria, many people are also working hard to ensure that there is gender equality. Even in the North, which is largely areas where women are not given their voice, their emirs are now working to ensure that something is done. And I think it's something that we all have to be happy about. So there's growing awareness in advocacy against gender-based violence. A lot of systems are also set up in place to ensure that that is protected. So I would just like to highlight some of the causes that bring the gender gaps, because all the issues I highlighted are some of the things that create the gender gaps. And all we are doing is to ensure that these gaps are closed. There's deeply entrenched cultural norms. We have all been talking about patriarchal structures. They are there. They are things that came up even before we were born. But we are all working hard to see how those structures can be removed so that women can also enjoy and give in their best just as the men. There's low political representation, which we have already talked about. And then discriminatory religious interpretations. So these are some of the things that affect the women. The Bible says that a woman's voice should not be heard. And then it's just interpreted literally like that. And then the women are shut down. In the churches, they cannot hold positions. These are issues that we need to find a way to address through collaboration and working with other organizations to see that we create awareness on the need and the importance of bringing in women. So there's low employment equality and job segregation. BC talked about that. Limited access to education, economic opportunities, socioeconomic and healthcare inequalities. These are some of the things that are affecting the women that is creating the gender gap. And we will all work together as organizations to strive to ensure that we close the gender gap. There are still other things: lack of legislative framework, absence of mechanisms to unite women in politics so that they can also ensure that they hold their force. For people who are following what is happening in Nigeria now, where a woman's voice, some people are trying to stifle a woman's voice, even though she is also in a strong position to have her voice. But because there are very few women in that environment, her voice cannot be heard. And even other women are unable to also lend a voice to ensure that women's rights are protected. So that's why we need many more women, and that's why we need parity. And then possibly the 35% affirmative action, we can just start from there. Finally, I'll just share some of the strategies. What do we do? I mean, these are issues, these are challenges. What do we do? So we need to confront the systemic barriers, address cultural attitudes that perpetuate gender stereotypes and hinder gender equality. We need to work in the communities. The traditional rulers, we need to speak to them. We need to talk to the gatekeepers, those ones that influence what happens in the communities, to make them understand that women, empowering women in the communities will be helpful and will help in the growth of that community. We also need comprehensive education and awareness, review whatever progress that we have made, just like we are doing now. It's 30 years after Beijing, and we are now trying to look back to see all the issues that we talked about. Has there been any progress? Well, I think we have made progress, but there's still a long way to go. But then we cannot keep quiet. We will need to continue to push to ensure. We need to promote women's economic empowerment. I think someone had raised that. Empower the women. When you empower the women in the communities, they will be helpful, not just in that community, but for the country. Engage men and boys. Engaging men and boys is in advocacy. They will help in gender equality. Let them understand the importance that empowering a woman will not take out their strength, will not take out their power. Empowering a woman will rather create a better society and a happier society. We strengthen the laws and the empowerment, enforcement of those laws. The laws are in place, even in Nigeria. Are we actually enforcing those laws? Do people know about them? Are the community members aware? We need to continue to press on, provide support services, set actionable targets. And finally, I just want to lend my voice to the need, the call. We have a lot of international laws that Nigeria, the country, has signed onto, but most of them are not domesticated. So we want a situation, a law like CEDAW, that Nigeria has signed onto. We also want it domesticated so that a lot of people will know about the law and then what it entails. That will help to empower the women. That will also help to bring gender equality that we're all working towards. In conclusion, the journey towards gender equality in Nigeria since Beijing has been both significant, made significant progress, enduring challenges. Indeed, for me, it is still a work in progress. We are not yet there, but we are going towards it. So while we celebrate the advancements in women's rights, it is imperative to address persistent issues that hinder true equality. We must address those issues. Addressing gender equality in Nigeria required a multifaceted approach that considers the cultural aspects, the religious aspects, the socioeconomic aspect, and the political factors. Continued commitment from all sectors of society is essential to ensure that gains are maintained and expanded. Let it not just be that we talk about it. We should continue to press on until we arrive at El Dorado. By fostering dialogue, collaboration, and innovative solutions, we can pave way for a more equitable future for women and girls in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ugo. I wish you had come with more statistics for us so that we can actually see how that 35% affirmative action is doing, you know, what the gaps are. But thank you so much for the strategies, especially that you have highlighted here. Some of them are similar to what we've heard before. I'll now like us to move to Philippines. We've heard from Ghana, Nigeria. Let's hear from Ugo is the first female head of service. Is that right, Ugo? I know you were once commissioner for Women's Affairs, so you are really on the government side and also an activist. So we'll send you back to the Nigerian government. Okay, so we now go to Rayla. Rayla, welcome. I know it's 3 a.m. there for you in Philippines. Thank you so much for staying awake to join us. Rayla is a chief global educator, actually. And she will tell us more about herself and about the SAM Foundation. Rayla, I tried to introduce what I Am SAM is all about, but then I felt I should let you come and do more justice to that. So Rayla, you're welcome. Where are you?
I'm here. I'm here, dear.
Good.
Good. Well, it's good morning in the Philippines, and afternoon, good evening, good day. Very happy and honored to be part of this. It's such an interesting topic and something that really needs, we need our voices to be heard. I'd like to thank Bissy for the invitation and also Lois. I met in 2015. Remember that in Geneva? That was wonderful. So
I remember. Welcome back. Welcome back.
And I think there was a picture of the three of us. I'll look for it. We did
okay,
take a picture.
yes,
Yes, at the cafe.
that was fun, and I'm really happy to be back. I do have an Afton is here.
Afton Mueller. Afton Reed.
Oh my gosh. Great. Okay. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. Sarah, may you kindly please? Okay, so let me start. So 30 years after Beijing, where are we now? The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action 1995 was a landmark agreement that set global priorities for gender equality. Since then, the Philippines has made notable progress in promoting women's rights. It remains one of the few Asian nations ranking high in gender parity, 16 out of 146 countries in the Global Gender Gap Report 2023. However, beneath these achievements, stark gender inequalities persist, particularly in economic participation, education, violence against women, and the plight of the female overseas workers. This discussion takes stock of progress, examines persistent challenges, and charts a path forward for gender equality in the Philippines beyond Beijing. So if you see in terms of legal and policy reforms for women's rights, since 1995, these are the four laws that were enacted. Anti-violence against women, all very self-explanatory. So 9 years after, in 2004, we ratified that. Then we have the Magna Carta of Women in 2009, Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Health Act. And in 2019, the Expanded Maternity Leave Act. Next, please. So there were three more laws that while not exclusively for women, they protect women's rights. These are the National Health Insurance Act, Anti-Age Discrimination in Employment Act, and the Safe Spaces Act, which is similar to a Sexual Harassment Act. Okay. So it says, okay, so for women in leadership and governance, in the government, in the executive branch, we have had 2 female presidents out of 17, 1 vice president, and 1 chief justice. Presently, in the present cabinet, we have 23 positions, top cabinet positions, 5 are held by women. So that's 21%. So these are they are the secretaries of the Department of Budget and Management, Trade and Industry, Tourism, Environment and National Resources, and the OIC for the Presidential Management Staff. For the judicial branch in the Supreme Court, 20% are women, but in the trial courts, 56% are sitting judges, which is wonderful. And when we go to the legislative branch, in the Senate, 7 out of 24 are women, so that's 29%. And in the lower house, it's 28%. Now, I'd like to share that in the Philippines, 80% of lawmakers in both the Senate and the lower house are from political dynasties. And that's terrible. Sarah, next, please. So for economic participation, 49% of female labor force, there is a 49% female force participation, higher than any other ASEAN nations, but still below men's 77, and this is World Bank 2023. As of 2024, Filipino women earned an average of 77.9% of what men earned, indicating a 22.1% gender pay gap. Women dominate informal work, particularly in domestic labor, caregiving, and micro enterprises, with 70% of Filipino women employed in low-wage or vulnerable jobs. That's ILO 2023, so very current numbers. And 37% of businesses in the Philippines are women-led, one of the highest globally. Next, please. Okay, now I would like to highlight the plight of the female overseas Filipino worker. Women comprise nearly 60% of the 1.8, or actually the figure I know is 2.2. I read 2.2 as well, but anyway, that's close enough. Mostly working as domestic workers, caregivers, and healthcare staff in the Middle East, Hong Kong, and Europe. While remittances contribute to economic growth, this mass labor migration has severe social costs, family breakdowns, and breakups due to prolonged absence, increased vulnerability of children left behind, the higher risk of mental health issues, school dropouts, and teenage pregnancies. And abuse and exploitation of women in foreign countries, documented cases of modern slavery, sexual violence, and non-payment of wages. Next, Sarah. For education, and this is where this is my field.
Your passion.
Yes, my passion. And we have a national crisis in girls, actually in girls and boys education. It's called learning poverty. And the Philippines is facing disproportionately affecting girls from poor and rural areas. 91% of Filipino 10-year-old children cannot read and understand age-appropriate text in both Filipino, our native language, our national language, and in English. Okay, that is a World Bank report of 2023. So 9 out of 10, and this is really scary, okay? Among the poorest households, nearly 100% of children struggle with basic literacy, severely limiting future economic opportunities. Why does this matter for gender equality? Because girls with low literacy are more likely to drop out, marry early, and enter low-paying jobs, further entrenching economic dependency and the cycle of poverty. So the lack of education perpetuates also gender-based violence, human trafficking, and exploitation. Next, please. In health, yes, we have the RH, reproductive health law. It exists, but implementation is blocked by religious resistance. So teenage pregnancy crisis, highest rate in Southeast Asia, 47 births per 1,000 girls. So that's the 2023 data, and 600,000 unsafe abortions annually due to restrictive laws. the Philippines remains the only country alongside the Vatican without divorce, keeping women trapped in abusive marriages. Next, please. The economic participation. I spoke about this already. Sarah. Sarah, may
Yes.
you, the next slide, please.
Okay, next slide. One moment.
I might have,
A duplicate. Okay, one moment.
let's see how that.
Okay.
Oh, can you look for the one on health?
On the one on health. Okay, one moment.
No, it's further, it's back. No, it's
Okay.
back. Okay, okay, carry on.
Okay.
Forward until this next slide. Okay. So in terms of peace and security, women in Mindanao face, that's where we have a war presently for the longest time. We're talking about decades. They face gender-based violence and displacement due to conflict. And less than 10% of women are involved in peace negotiations. Next, please. Okay, so what are the root causes? The Catholic Church has a big role. It blocks full reproductive rights implementation, and of course the divorce law. Although it has been passed in the lower house in the third and final reading just 2 months ago, we are watching it, and in the Senate it's 50-50. So it's an equal amount of those that are for it and those that are against it. So it's a touch and go in that aspect. There are alternatives that they are proposing, but to satisfy certain, to satisfy it, because the truth is, people continue to live with the way they live, whether there's that law or there's no divorce law or not. So in the Philippines, patriarchal, as mentioned, men can have as many wives, even if they're Christian, or they don't have to be Muslim. So for education, again, the root causes for the gender disparity would be the 91% of Filipino 10-year-olds being functionally illiterate, the gender stereotypes in textbooks which discourage women in STEM and leadership, and the limited digital access, not only in the rural and indigenous, for the rural and indigenous girls, because there's much poverty in Metro Manila. We have 150 million population, and in Metro Manila, it's 16 million. Okay, so there is what you call for the past maybe 30 years or 40 years, what you call the urban poor. That kind of that's what they're called. Okay, because sometimes it's better to be out in the rural area. You have food, you have fresh air, you have the fields to run.
Environment.
Yes, exactly. So we go to economic exclusion. 22% women earn 22% less than men. And for the OFW, that's Overseas Filipino Migration Trap, majority of female overseas workers lack job security and rights. And the third item in economic exclusion is the lack of women-led job creation policies. Next, please. Okay, so I am in focusing on an action-focused solution. Okay. I have been an advocate for quite some time. Formally, my mother founded the I Am Sam Foundation. It stood for Stop Abuse Mom, because I was abused. And since that was in 2010, so I have worked with 3 administrations of 6 years each. And each time you change, and I work, actually, I go from top down. I stay in the grassroots, but I write the president, and he endorses me to the Department of Education secretary. But still and all, despite that from top down, it has been very, very, very frustrating that every time you change the superintendent of a district, you change the principal of a small or big school, you have to start from scratch. And this is the reason why I have decided to digitalize, starting with education. Because 20 plus years ago, my mother and I wrote beginning reader books for children. Little did we know that it would address learning poverty today. So the 3 E's that the SAM Foundation focuses on today would be education, empowerment, and entrepreneurship. Now, Bissy, remember when we met in 2017 at the UN, I shared with you this program. We will be digitalizing it. This is Go for Gold for Girls, or Go for Greatness for Girls. G for G. This will be in an app, okay? So, Sarah, the next slide, please. So you will see that I have decided to take it, to really do something about it, and not rely on the institutions, because really and truly they just delay the progress that we actually can do. Okay, so from the books, I made 30 ebooks. So these are the 5 books are 350 pages. The 30 books are roughly about a total of 750 pages. I am still finishing up 13 more. Okay, so that will be over 1,000 pages for the children, and it has audio files and some animation. And then I went further, Sarah. Actually, just very recently in November, late November, I did this. I made a YouTube channel, okay? It's a fun way to address learning poverty. And I am an educator that believes in early. So, and I have the answers to why early, why English, why reading, why bilingualism or many more languages, and why my method. Okay, so it not only teaches English and reading, but it has several mini segments on the super brain, on super world, which teaches global citizenship and environmental responsibility. Super me, the ME is my empowerment, magic manners, because we're social beings, and happy habits. So next, please. So that's the super school. I'm ending very soon. Next. Okay, so I also am the president of Global Women BPW Manila. You will know that BPW is Business and Professional Women. So we have about, we just started, and we have about 200 members all over the Philippines. And I am very blessed also that I have support from the diplomatic circle who have been hosting us, particularly the Malaysian ambassador, the Dutch, the Indian, the German ambassador. Yes, these are the ones that are very, very supportive, and the Italian ambassador. And I have a team as well, women from the club, okay, and one gentleman who helped me put together the creative design and direction for the YouTube channel. These women are all very successful, so they're volunteers, and they have different tasks, and they're helping also in fundraising. So I'm very, very happy because together, everyone, not only us, but everyone, because it's free for the world, everyone shall achieve more, much miracle and magic. Next, please. Okay, in conclusion, the Philippines has the laws, the frameworks, and the potential to bridge gender gaps. What we need now is better execution, accountability, multi-sectoral collaboration. And when I say CSR, it's not only corporate social responsibility, but civil social responsibility, which is very pronounced in the Philippines. And that is perhaps because we are an archipelago of 7,100 islands, and we are in the typhoon belt. We have 22 typhoons every year. So you can just imagine that. So we're very used to, when there's a call to help, we're out there. There are many, many women who also are part of civil society, having their own foundations. So my final thought is, true progress is when every Filipina has the power to dream, learn, earn, and live free from fear. And I'd like to extend it to the whole world. True progress, or real progress, as they say, is 50-50. But true progress is when every single woman and child has the power to dream, learn, earn, and live free from fear. And my last slide is, stay super. That's special, unique, and precious, empowered to be responsible, resilient, respect-filled, and respectful. This is Rayla. You can take my contact, and I would love for you to please share this program and watch us grow in YouTube. It is my I affirm and claim that we will have 1 million subscribers, and I pray that it will not take as long as gender parity. Yes. How do I pronounce it? Louise?
That's fine.
Lois. Okay. Yes, dear.
Okay. Yeah. Rayla, this has been an outstanding presentation. I thank you very much. Having lived in Italy for quite some time, it's a common belief that you can get a Filipina to clean your house, to watch your children, to do any of the basic needs. And there was an effort made by a women's group to change that so that they could be in better positions and have more dignity and respect. But the Catholic Church stepped in and prevented that from happening. So though the Italians did not want refugees from Africa and other places, they welcomed the Filipinas because they were Catholic.
I see. Yes, I see. I'm married to an Italian national, Lois.
Bravo, signora.
So,
Okay.
so I do when we're based here now in the Philippines, but we visit. Anyway, I do see a lot of my countrymen there, and my heart bleeds. But compared to other countries, Italy at least takes care of them very well.
Pretty good,
But
yep.
for those that are not able to bring their families, as I mentioned earlier, it results into really and truly broken marriages, broken families, teenage marriages. You know, the footprint of a home is easily 3 meters by 3 meters, and everything is done in that space. So you sleep like sardines, and sexual abuse is accessibility. So that's why, I mean, the foundation focuses a lot on the development of self-worth as a means to alleviate poverty and to nation build. So we have a protocol which is underpinned by the three, for me, most important UN documents. Of course, the first is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So it is, I am special, unique, and
all that thought. We'll come back to that
Okay.
in the
Okay.
conclusion. Thank you so much, because everything you said is what we've heard about what's happening in practically all the other countries. So the issue of political policies and good governance. So we know these are issues we need to keep on the forefront. If beyond Beijing, 30 years of Beijing, what more do we need to do? Thank you so much for highlighting that. I'll come back to you so that, you can give us more on your program about the 3 E's. I love Stay Super. I love the acronym and I love the way you've spelled it out. Now we are going to go back to Nigeria, but she is going to talk beyond just Nigeria. This is an award-winning transformational technology leader. We all know that the world is now digital, and that's why we can have the webinar being hosted in US. Lois is in New York right now. You are in the Philippines. I'm here in Switzerland. There are people who joined us from Saudi Arabia. Then we have people from Nigeria. We are all scattered all over the world, but we are able to connect. We are all able to be in the same space at the moment. So the world is now digital. So technological advancement is very, very important right now. And we are going to bring in somebody who is going to shed more light on how we can harness this transformation and advancement for the good of women, to help our world to become fairer, to become more peaceful, to become more just. As we all know, only 35% of all science, technology, engineering, and maths graduates are women. So we need more women in that field if they are going to be able to compete adequately in the future. That's the future. That's where the world is going in now. So I'd like to bring in Tinuade Oguntuyi. She just got back from Brazil. Thank you, Tinuade, for coming to join us this evening. She's very passionate about STEM inclusion, about the impact on knowledge and, on women and girls. She does a lot to encourage women and girls to get into that field. She actually founded a community dedicated to empowering individuals through STEM education with a special focus on marginalized and minority groups. Tinuade, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adebisi. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lois. Thank you. The last one from Rila got me really emotional. Thank you so much for all you're doing. I really want to agree, Dr. Adebisi, that without speaking about technology, without advocating inclusion of women and girls in STEM, possibly will not be able to sustain our digital lifestyle. See how many countries already that you have called, and let's imagine the number of participants on this call or people that even later will view this communication or what we have been talking about. So technology and STEM is very critical in our age and time, and it's also one of the tools that we can use in bringing about this equal opportunity that we are seeking for girls and women. I love what Rila said when she was saying we're looking at digitizing this, and that is part of the move and part of what we talk about. I will quickly say that although we might say that 5% globally of girls or women by statistics STEM graduates, but not even all of them are actively working in STEM. Based on record, as of the last I checked, is about less than 30% that are working actively in STEM. And that is not even to now talk of how many women-led tech startups or even traditional tech establishments we have. I can go on and start mentioning. Is it Amazon? Is it Google Alphabet? Is it Twitter or SpaceX or Netflix? All of these tech giants, I can't even mention one that is maybe founded by a woman. Does that mean that we don't have what it takes? I believe the answer is actually not a yes, because we have what it takes, but it still comes back to all these cultural bias and the norms, and especially speaking from point of view as a Nigerian. Then I did not understand what being marginalized completely meant until one day I tried to just assess if you are an African, then you are a Nigerian, because even in Africa, it looks like some are more equal than the others. Then you are a Nigerian, and being in Nigeria, you probably grew up in a slum, and then you're a girl child. It now brings the marginalization like almost in 4x to 1. And that is an example of the person speaking to you this morning, afternoon, evening, depending on what time you're joining in. So some of the advocacy work that I do alongside other people that I know are also passionate about this is to show some form of representation. And I'll explain quickly what I mean by representation. A number of times we go out to talk to students, and why the Tina Adeniyi Tech Foundation is really looking at the marginalized is because private schools these days now have the resources to be able to maybe incorporate STEM education into their curriculum, because of course the students pay a lot. It brings it back to what Rayla said when she gave us a particular number of the representation in politics of women, but she quickly added the caveat that most of them are from political dynasty. It's the same thing with education, even in Nigeria. You see people that are going to schools that can be equal, that we can say is equal to what we have in advanced or Western world. But what happens to the children or parents, mothers that do not even have an opportunity to go to school themselves? Now they have children that they also to put in public schools. So one of the way we do it now is catching them young and regardless of where they are from. So we go to educate them on this is what STEM can do to you. I can't remember who was speaking. I think it was Gina when she was talking about contextualizing. And that is exactly what we're doing. We don't want to talk about the fanciful things in technology or STEM. We want to start it with applicability. Even if by you having clean water, how do you separate water using some simple means of scientific, technological instruments or tools that are not necessarily costly to make your water clean in your neighborhood? How do you ensure that erosion is not disturbing your area, even using simple tools, and like starting it from there so that you begin to see the applicability in where you are. It's not enough to just bring all the AI. Like recently, there was a guy in Nigeria that did GBT, because if everybody knows Nigeria, we have this local English that we speak that is called Pidgin English. So what he has done is to do like a GBT that brings all of these words in Pidgin. We call it Pidgin English, so that the average person on the road can relate with it, responding in Yoruba language, Igbo language, Hausa language, so that we are not just adopters, consuming. We are now beginning to do something by ourselves, for ourselves. We can scale it later for global relevance, but please, let's bring technology, let's bring STEM into what we can utilize. I think utilizing it first is what brings about that expansion. Sadly, I am in the telecoms connectivity space. And just yesterday, I had to write to a convener of a program that talks on critical network infrastructure in the country. And I looked at the array of speakers. 16 speakers shown were all male. And I couldn't hold it back. I had to write to him that what exactly is the issue? You don't have any woman on this call. Does that mean the women that are playing in this field don't have any contribution? And when he replied, he said, I understand your point, but the truth is that when we even write to companies, these are the names of people they give to us. And oftentimes I will go for programs, events that are industry-based. And when it's time to take pictures, there will be 2 women. Guess who? Myself and probably the MC. Because every other person lined up are men. So representation now is helping us to showcase that a woman can be in STEM or tech and can also stay long to that level of leadership, decision making, and to influence. And that brings me to one key point that I know everybody has been speaking gender-based violence and all that, but when we empower women in this context of this empowerment, because I love the point that Gina also raised about that, in this case of empowerment is to make women to be socially and economically viable, like to be a major contributor. Fulata said that poverty is not lack of money, but lack of choice. When we see girls now that, they are from very lowly backgrounds, you empower them by exposing them to technology, tech tools, where they can also promote the average mother's business that is just a seller in the marketplace. Now they see that, oh, with digital tools, I can help my parents, I can help my mom to advertise what she's selling, and we can make more money. Now they are beginning to, to feel empowered that if I can do this, I can even do much more. Now we are now exposing them to things that, do you know how the so-called internet you hear everywhere come about? It's just bringing some cables together, even though literally it's not as simple as we might have said it, but we create that picture in their mind to see that, the whole ecosystem is thriving because somebody like you can do something that will make it go to the next level. Now they're beginning to see that, oh, I have a voice and I can also contribute. It's not the case of, oh, every time you see somebody, or you can't even conceptualize what drives maybe the telecoms or internet infrastructure. Now we break it down. We begin to let them see it. And, many a times I'm brought to tears when you see young girls, even adult women, come and say, oh, we never knew it is this interesting. So who has told us the lie? Who has sold us the lie that this is not meant for women, that we don't have a space here? And that is why last year during the International Women's Day, I came up with this. I said, nobody should do you a disservice from coming into the STEM ecosystem. View it like a puzzle. It's just a big picture, but there are different pieces that comes together to make it that whole picture. If the head is missing, if the foot is missing, if the side is missing, it does not become that one big picture. When everybody's voice comes into it, then it makes it a big picture. And then it makes sense to anybody seeing it or using it. It's so pathetic that the same way we are talking about it in politics, health, violence, a lot of mindset and reconditioning needs to be done. In Nigeria, where I'm from, it might still be believed that the girls should not do a lot of math or science, but should do maybe more of home economics, commercial classes, which might involve accounting, beginning to make it from even younger age look like this is a very restricted area, is a no-go area. So we going into public schools especially is breaking this barrier, is helping to recondition how these girls perceive all of this. Unfortunately, even from statistics, girls they are topping the list with cyberbullying, because somebody can see a girl's picture itemize and begin to pick points of the girl's body structure to make jokes. So now we're beginning to also teach them that you have to own yourself. You are not a girl or a woman by mistake. You have to own who you are, and knowing that will help you in vocalizing what you know is true or wrong. And you become expressive, not to go excessively, but to be able to appropriate everything you have learned into communicating for a greater good. Now we are deploying more girls to champion other girls. So if you're in a safer internet club, for instance, your duty is also to teach others beyond your classroom. Go outside in your family, in the marketplace, also talk to people about it. One of the challenges, anyways, that, and I keep maintaining, and we keep doing that. I'm in the community of practice by Meta Safe Online. And one of the things we're doing is to translate most of this thing into simplified stories or language that people can easily consume. Because you see, the people want to come into tech, they want to come into STEM, but most of these materials are written in English. So it makes it a little difficult for them to want to jump on this, even when you have told them all that it takes. So these are some of the things that we are also doing to help with this access, to help with people, accepting this concept even more. One of the things I also want to touch on is the number of improvements. I must say, if I go by almost 16 years now in my career that's post NYC, the narrative is changing. At least now I know businesses, we call and say, oh, we heard that so person worked with you like 5 years ago, and we're looking to hire a female engineer or team lead, and we want you to just speak about that person. Several years ago, I don't think that was the case, because one of the driving force for me was because of that gap that I spotted, that when I joined the tech firm, there were no female core technical managers. They were only leading the non-technical teams. And I spotted that this is not a norm that should keep being. And I told myself, if I don't have anybody showing me the ropes, I will find where the ropes are and I'll start to show others. And that is this pursuit or purpose to also advocate for more inclusion in STEM. The beautiful thing is that everyone has a place in STEM. One of the things we demystify also in bridging this gap, especially when it comes to STEM and tech, is to tell them that everything in STEM is not about coding. That over time had kept people away from technology because they believe if I'm in tech, I have to code. So we begin to tell them now that there are areas in tech that needs your voices, that does not need you to code. There are low codes, there are no codes, there are even some that does not involve. All you need is to bring your perspective. Quickly, I'll say this. There are a number of finance apps, agri apps, that people that even created them or the founders are not technical people. They don't even have technical background. Some of them studied sociology. Some of them studied agriculture. But now they can bring this perspective, digitize it, and people can consume these solutions. So these are part of the advocacy work that we are doing, just to sell this concept of STEM and tech to girls in a way that they will see it just like the regular buying and selling. And the follow-up to this is the more we are able to get, the more force we are able to build. So it becomes easier, because this is how it works. Now I'm in an office that I can make decisions. When we train people, they can come as interns. When we have more people, they grow into roles that they can also give room to others that are coming after them. And by the time we keep doing this, I think we'll be able to compress this projection by World Economic Forum of the 5 generations to come. Because I'm beginning to think in my head, we have the Gen Z, so how many Gen Zs of generations do we need to be able to close this gender gap? Another thing is the voice. We need our collaborative voice. Women need to start speaking for women. We still have a lot of gender-based violence. Let me tell you, because when a woman is in a marriage that is abusive, or a woman is being abused, the sisters of the husband also advise that, oh, you don't have a lot of men out there, stay put. And you know why women will stay? They are not economically empowered. And that is why we are prioritizing bringing technology education, STEM education to them, so that even from the comfort of their homes, they can do things. They can do as simple as affiliate marketing, digital marketing. And that is why even if I'm in connectivity and telecom space, the advocacy we do is not streamlined to just telecoms and connectivity. We spread it across, depending on what you have passion for. If it's cybersecurity, if it's numbers, if it's data science, if it's business analysis, you fancy, graphics to communicate anything at all within this ecosystem that will be able to bring out the best version of you. We sell it to them. We advocate it. And now we are seeing improvement. In fact, this last Safer Internet Day, when we got to a particular school, after we delivered our talks and gave practical examples, almost the whole school registered that they want to join the club. And I was so impressed because we had a number of girls that also asked questions. They are curious. They want to know. And I believe the more of advocacy we do in all of this, we will have the next generation of girls building the Amazons of this world, building the Alphabet of this world, building the Teslas of this world because of this advocacy. What are some of the things that government can also help us? In Nigeria today, the National Information, pardon me,
Okay, it looks like we might have lost her connection. Oh, there she is.
Yeah, I had to quickly pause because I was coughing. So I said the National Information Technology Development Agency in Nigeria, they are also trying this International Women's Month. They announced how they are also trying to support gender inclusion in tech by creating programs in form of cohorts that more girls can come into. Another way that we are pushing this agenda is after school clubs, just like I mentioned, the Safer Internet Day, Safe Online. We also have, which is like an integration of what we used to know as Jet Club. Now we are breaking it. We have the AI robotics, we have the science, which will bring the knowledge from the physics class, chemistry class to build simple items. We also push this agenda. There is a group that I belong to, the Girl Force Movement. And what we do, we partner with Sweetness, which is Society of Women Engineers globally, to go into schools, and school children now will do projects. They will begin to understand how hydraulics work, just to bring those concepts close to them. Let them begin to see its applicability so that they are broadened and they will begin to see that, oh, if I pursue this, I'll be able to do it. And what I want to emphasize is we are not stereotyping this to just formal education, because one of the things over time that has stopped us is necessarily needing people that are in schools. Now you know that where I was growing up, where I lived like a slum, we used to have this young boy that goes around and he picks up scraps. But by the time he's done with picking up all the scraps, he cleans them up. It will make small bulbs, make it with a wood and come up with something. It will make real, like cars that have wheels with crown corks and every of these things. So this is also an aspect that we are looking at now, so that where we don't have all the computer systems to teach all of these concepts, we are also able to use the day-to-day scraps that they see to talk about it. That's a next level of what we are looking at, and we are really hopeful that we get more people to support. Another thing that I know we're doing now is post-mentoring assessment. Beyond just mentoring, we want to see what people are able to do after coming out of mentorships, so that they pay it forward. I used to say something that when you give one person a thing, it's just one. When you give two people, it might look like 3 or 4, but by the time you give 10 people, it becomes a little geometric, because that 10 people can probably affect 100 other people, 100 people like 1,000, and it blows up like that. So those and many are the ways we're trying to bridge this gap when it comes to gender, and we're hopeful that we make more giant stride even as we push all of this agenda. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much. This is really wonderful. We've heard a lot about education. You've taken it into the tech space, how we can reduce that phobia that girls and women may have about, technology and science, bringing it closer to them, removing that fear, making them very familiar with it. Now we've gone past the time. I know we're enjoying ourselves, so we need to quickly rush now so that we can end in the next 5 minutes. So I'd like to go around. Let me open the floor for questions and answers before we move on. Yes, Lois.
I would like to provide some resources that I think are more meaningful than my reading a poem. One is there's an organization called WIEGO, WIEGO, that is Women in the Informal Sector Organizing. Another is in South Pacific. I know it's in Philippines and Indonesia. You have very serious storms. In South Asia, in some of the islands, they have created what's called FemLink Pacific. And so by radio or by other communication, when there's a bad storm coming, when there is a trauma in any way, they have a call chain. And that has really helped women survive some of the climate issues that are so much with us today. And then my last comment is, have you been affected by the Trump cutback on aid? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lois. A lot of projects will be impacted by the Trump cutback aids. But I'm hoping that will change before real damage is done. So, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open now for questions to our panelists, our excellent panelists, for their excellent presentations. Do you have any questions? Lois, please, I hope you provide the resources you shared now. If you send them to me, I'll be able to include them in the report so that we can send it out to everybody.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So questions, comments?
Betsy,
Yes, Raylan.
dear, since we don't have time to share the video, I'd love to share it with everyone, so you can share the link.
Okay. You want to drop it in the chat so people can pick it up from there?
Oh, let me
drop it in the chat. Yes. Okay. So while we do that, let me round up. Any comments? Thank you all so much. We've had a lot. Yes, we'll go.
Okay, I just wanted to know, I think Lois was asking a question. She asked a question, really. Have you been affected by the Trump cutback on AIDS?
Yeah.
Was that a question? Okay, fine.
Yes.
Actually, for us, for DoveNet, most of our work actually revolves around donor support. And I must let you know that DoveNet has been affected. Indeed, just this afternoon before we came on this call, I'm the co-chair for CSO Network in our state in Nigeria. And I was discussing with the other co-chair on the need for us to organize a webinar like this to get the feelings of other CSOs on what the future holds, and then how do we strategize to ensure that we keep our work going. So that's the stage. That also shows that we are all thinking along the same line. Most organizations definitely are affected. Indeed, our organization, we had to lay off the staff because we cannot continue to keep them when we don't know where the resources will be coming from. But then it's also an opportunity for us to begin to look inwards, to now know, in the absence of funds, what can we do on ourselves? How can we reach out to
I like that.
other people on that? So that's where we are. And I hope that as we continue to engage on this issue, that we are going to get some information on how to move forward. Thank you.
Yeah. And Dr. PC,
Okay.
about questions, I think Patricia had a question for me. I responded in the chat. I don't know if I can share that with everybody else.
Yes, you can share it, because I was going to go around all of you to find out what's your, what your parting thoughts will be before we close the seminar. So this can be your chance now.
To answer her question.
Okay, go ahead, Gina.
Okay, so Patricia wanted to find out if some challenges that Ghana has in implementing frameworks and mechanism in addressing gender-based violence. And I would say, even though significant strides have been made, again, one of the major challenge we have is a changing political landscape, where often governments tend to appoint individuals to the gender ministry who are not particularly passionate or committed to issues related to women. We saw the just ended administration had a gender minister who vacated a post and was in the US, didn't resign, but wasn't working as well. And when complaints were made, she would drop videos on TikTok antagonizing everybody, where everything was left to a standstill within the gender ministry. So these are some of the examples that may stall progress that had been made in previous administration. Another would be limited resources and visible gaps in implementation. Even though we may have very good framework, without resources to back its implementation, it would just be an exercise in futility. Another very significant challenge is the lack of data and digitalization of the frameworks and mechanisms that are available. I like that Tinuade touched on the significance of making very data-driven decisions and looking at technology as the way to go in the future. We need to be very deliberate about integrating very data-driven response mechanism and also relying on data in our reporting and evaluating and monitoring frameworks. So this will be my response, Patricia. I hope that I've touched on a few, and yeah, I hope that this helps. But all in all, I think that significant strides have been made regarding achieving gender parity, but there's still a long way to go. And not to say that the responsibility barely lies with international NGOs, no. The responsibility ultimately lies within our respective governments in implementing and enforcing policies, and also ensuring that they bridge the needed gender disparity that exists. Of course, international organizations would assist with the frameworks, assist with enforcing mechanisms, assist with resources more often than not. But without government spearheading and driving the implementation processes, these international, the well-intentioned frameworks would never materialize at local level, and we would never see the outcome as they should be. So this will be my parting word, and just to thank everybody for joining us, and thank all my colleagues as well for their wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gina. Ugo has spoken. Fulata, do you have any last-minute thoughts or comments you'd like to add to your wonderful presentation?
Thank you, BC. Just to say thank you for including me, and this panel was powerful, and I've learned a lot. And if anything, I know that what we have really agreed on is that this is just the beginning. We need to do more, and we need to dig deeper, and we need to collaborate to achieve much.
Thank you so much. I like that. We need to collaborate, especially when we are talking about limited funding. We are talking about the limited resources. You know, I think this is our reality now with the cutbacks and all that. We need to now learn how to self-help, how to go inwards, collaborate amongst ourselves. One organization is able to do something. We don't need to go and pay our sources. Get them to work for you, you know. Collaborate amongst ourselves. Thank you so much, Fulata, for that. Lois, anything you want to add on?
I have one more resource to share, and that is IPES. That is an organization in many parts of the world, including the global south, that talks about labor unions that include women. And sometimes organizing labor can make an impact because they have ECOSOC status. I've seen them in Geneva and in New York. They're women who have real grassroots experience, and they can try a different route to empowerment.
Yeah, localizing resources. I don't know who spoke about that. Was that Gina or yeah, somebody talked about that. Even Fulata, you know,
Yes.
so some of these policies, people at the grassroots level don't understand them. We need to break it down. You know, we are talking Beijing. A lot of people know Beijing as a phrase, but do they really understand Beijing and what it implies? Do they really understand that, you know, it's 30 years since that World Conference? So on this note, I would like to conclude. If indeed the Beijing Platform of Action is to be achieved in its entirety for women, each and every one of the actions must be realized. We've heard a lot of obstacles, you know, a lot of challenges that we still need to address, but it's doable because we've come a very long way and a lot of progress has been made. We are able to gather now. We know the issues. We're able to gather now and talk about them. So what we need to do now is to go a step further to make sure that every woman and girl understand what the issues are. That way they will understand the need for representation, for the need for them to be at the table. Then other women will also understand the need to support other women. You know, Philippines, I think, is probably the only country, maybe Zambia as well, that's had 2 times female presidents all over the world. Maybe India as well. So, and there are women in those countries. So what's happening? It's about 50% of, you know, gender, 50% male, the ratio is 50%. So why are women not rallying together to vote other women into this, you know, very youth political corridors? So from tackling barriers to education to advocating against religious barriers. Rayla mentioned that when she was talking, the impediment from religion. So we need to continue to advocate against child marriage, against, you know, advocate for spaces where the girls will be heard. You know, we also heard from Tinuade about what she's doing to close the gender digital gap. So we also need to go out and, you know, in our little, wherever we are, let's bring the girls. Let's demystify these things we hear about, you know, that STEM or science is not going to NASA, it's not going to space. It's just, and it's not all about coding and writing programs. There are so many other things that even as a social scientist or an art student, they can get into. So irrespective of the bad governance at the political level, irrespective of the limited resources, we need to make sure that the policies are understood, top to bottom.
One last word. Stories make a difference. If you can put on your website or send out material that tells the stories of real women that can resonate across cultural lines.
Yeah.
Can
That
I
is
say
very
something? Bissy?
yes, Rayla.
Yes, I'd like to say the world is changed by what we do, not what we say.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So that's so important.
that's
And
very
it's it's like what you said. It doesn't have to be big. It starts with really just, looking into a girl's eye and saying you're enough, you're worth it. Go for it, fly. I'm here for you.
yeah.
Good.
There are two comments in the chat that I would like to bring forward. One is by Manjit. Manjit is, the last time we had a panel on International Women's Day, Manjit gave a very powerful presentation on inclusive, including the girls into this science space. She's with CERN, and she just dropped a comment now about collaboration, an invisible force in making the impossible to become possible, the impossible possible. Tinuade also, let me get back to you, on your parting thoughts. This could be your last, what message you want to leave us with before we go on. Tinuade? She left a comment in the chat about collaboration.
I dropped my comment because I had to now jump on the road, and I know that I might have some distortion.
Yeah, so
And
just
that's exactly what I wanted to say, that our collaborative work back to our intentionality is what will bring us closer to that equitable world we want. Just like Rayla said, we will not just talk about it, we also have to do. So let our resources, our money, our time, everything be where we want to get to. And it starts with us. In those little things we do, we can't change everything. I cannot possibly work on gender-based violence, work on human trafficking, work on digital inclusion, but the little I can do, I begin to do, and we all come together so that it's not silo, and we can eventually get something done that really impacts the world positively. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tinuade. There's also another comment about how people must be passionate about gender-sensitive policies, including financial policies. It's up to us to go out there and make sure that the next woman, the next girl we meet, we are impacting on them. We are breaking this down for them. We can't continue to work in silos. So let's keep pushing for gender equality and a future where no woman or girl is left behind, because together we can make the generational change, and we can make lasting changes. We've heard that it will take another 158 years for us to reach gender parity, but we can shorten that period. We just need to come together and be that generation for lasting change. On this note, thank you so much.